Hello everyone, so I'm here with another video. Today we're gonna watch semifinals of Pro Tour Dark Ascension between Kibler and Jon Finkel. This game is super famous because it looked like Jon can really lose, and then he lost to 3 Galvanic Blasts. So he lost even though he had a negate in his hand, and just basically everything looked up, and Kibler was just able to kill him with the blasts. I think this game was very interesting, not only the last turn, even though I want to talk about it as well, but there are other interesting points that I want to talk about. So let's look at the deck lists first. So Esper Spirits was the deck that no one really played before this tournament. It was kind of a breakout deck of the tournament. People obviously played a regular Delver deck, everybody knew about it, it was the deck to beat, but no one played this Spirit deck. And what was good about the Spirit deck was that it was really good in the mirror, because it had access to Lingering Souls, which was obviously insane against all these lists playing Delvers and Geists and stuff. It just allowed you to grind better. This deck kinda falled out after this tournament because in the format there was this Phyrexian spell that dealt X damage to all flyers, and that was obviously insane against this deck, so people kinda went back to the regular Delver deck after this tournament, but it was really good for this one. But it was actually verse against this red-green Ram deck. This deck was probably brought to the tournament because they thought that they had a good Delver matchup, but this deck was even better against the Spirit decks, because the regular Delver deck can kind of go under a little bit better. It can also play Restoration Angel end of turn and then hold up counters and stuff, whereas this deck just has bunch of free mana 2/2s. And that's not very good against Galvanic Blasts, Wayflyers, and Slackstorms. Or not, yeah, is it a Slackstorm? Let's see, yeah. Looking at the sideboards, I obviously don't know for sure how they boarded, but I assume that Brian brought in Trance and all the removal spells. From what I've heard from the interviews before the match, the way they approached these kind of matchups was that they just turned into kind of a mid-range deck, maybe shave some of the ramp spells, and just rely on a bunch of removal spells and these 4-drops in Tron and Handmaster of the Fells. I think that plan is very good against a regular Delver deck, and especially for game 1, but post-board the Spirit deck can fight. They have more permission spells to deal with your big threats, and they can actually outgrind your Handmasters and Trans because of making huge flying hexproof creatures, or just by playing Lingering Souls and stuff. And also Jon Finkel has access to Celestial Purge and Dismember, so he can actually kill the Handmaster and stuff. So it's not you can just play 2 removal spells, play a Tron, and go for the win in all the games. So it's kind of an interesting matchup. I think Jon boarded out Vapor Snake and Revoke Existence for Negate, Mana Leak, Dissipate, Dismember, Purge. He probably brought in the 2 Geists as well, because they're pretty good against Handmaster. You can block the 2/2s, you can tap a Titan if it resolves and stuff. So I'm not entirely sure how he boarded, but yeah. Let's look into the game. Let's fast forward a little bit. So yeah, Jon starts with the Gitaxian Probe, so we can see Brian's hand. Yeah, so it's Handmaster, Freelance, Combust, Zenith, and Galvanic Blasts, really good hand. I think that Brian boarded out Birds of Price. They played 1 bird so that you can, search for it with Zenith on turn 2 and basically turn it into Rampant Growth. But, in this matchup, when they have a bunch of mana leaks and stuff, you don't really... Your plan isn't necessarily just turbo out a Titan, and just searching for a bird is kind of a weak play, especially when you have Wayflyers and Slackstorms in your deck. So I think he boarded it out. Jon sees a pretty good ponder here. The key card there is obviously Mana Leak, especially with the Snapcaster in his hand. He doesn't really want to draw an island, but I think the Mana Leak is good enough that he just kind of has to keep it. Yeah. So there is an interesting decision point on turn 2 that I want to talk about. It's whether you just play an island and keep up mana leak, or you play an avoiding wilds. So Jon decides to play an island, but I don't really agree with that. Obviously, Jon Finkel is one of the best players, if not the best player ever. But I just don't really agree with this play. Let's talk about it. So like the reason why you would want to keep up mana leak is obviously that if Brian draws either Rampant Growth or Sphere of Suns, you would want to counter it, right? Like it's not like an insane exchange for you, but given the opportunity, I think you do it, especially with the Snapcaster in your hand. Brian can draw like a Tron, which you can counter, and Tron on turn 3 is really good. Also, if they get a bunch of mana, they can get kind of around your mana leaks, so I think it's fine to counter 2-drop. But he saw his hand with the Gaxion Probe, so he would have to draw it in 2 turns. And that's not like extremely likely. And the problem with not playing the Evolving Wilds is that you can't actually play Lingering Souls on turn 3. And that, like, you might think that that's not like a hugely impactful play, but like dealing to a turn for basically the rest of the game can mean like 8 or 10 damage. That's like very significant. And you basically give that up for, there's a chance that he draws Rampant Growth. But even if that happens, I still think that having a mana leak in your hand is fine. You can still like turn 5 play a 3-drop and hold a mana leak. They do have like a bunch of Titans and Zeniths that are pretty expensive, so it's not that super likely that mana leak is gonna be dead like extremely soon. And I just think that like not being able to play the Lingering Souls on turn 3 when you can like kind of safely do that, right? If they don't have the 2-drop ramp spell, they just have 2 mana. You can play Lingering Souls. There is nothing really they can do on turn 3. Then you untap and you're like dealing 2 a turn, which is definitely something. Like these mana leaks are obviously good. They have a bunch of expensive stuff, but eventually they're gonna be dead. So like having some kind of a pressure is important. Like one thing going for not playing the wilds is that if you draw like Glacier Fortress or something, you can use the Evolve Wilds to search for a swamp. They don't actually have that many sources of black. But I still think that playing the wilds on turn 2 and searching for planes was better. Maybe he was worried about Brian searching for the birds, but with his hand, it's like one threat and like 2 removal spells. Like I'm not even sure he would have wanted to search for that. Like it's kind of a waste of a powerful card, and also it's super likely that he boarded the birds out. So importantly, Brian drew Autumn's Whale or whatever. It's basically the fixed version of Whale Summer. Funny enough, it's the fixed version that was printed before the actual whale. The whale got obviously banned in multiple formats. It's an insane card, so like this is the version of it that we've seen in a previous set. Brian only plays 1, so it's not like you can really play around it, but it's extremely powerful when you can play like a Titan or something and just like veil or counter and resolve it for obvious reasons. So Jon is kind of committed to say go again here. Like it doesn't really make sense to play a Lingering Soul here when you know about the Handmaster. So yeah. So because Brian drew the whale, he doesn't want to play the Handmaster here and just attacks for 1. There's nothing really that can happen to him. The only thing that Jon can do is play Vapor Snake, but Brian knows that he boarded those out. So, and even if he didn't, it's not like super bad for him, so he just gets in with the 1 damage, why not? Another reason to not play the Handmaster there, by the way, is that you can be worried about potential Grog Skull Captain into Phantasma Mage, so you want to be able to have a Galvanic Blast up. If Brian had a Slackstorm in his hand, it might have been different, but when you don't, and your hand is pretty good with like this Combust and Galvanic Blast, and you don't know about the Lingering Souls yet, like risking the potential 2 free Hexproofs is very dangerous. So there is another interesting point. So Brian's hand, let's see, it's like Freelance, Combust, Galvanic Blast, Autumn's Veil, and Handmaster of the Fells. So what Brian decides to do is that he just plays Handmaster with Whale. I don't really agree with that play for multiple reasons. Let's talk about it. So, obviously, it seems really good to just like resolve Handmaster here. You don't necessarily know that they have a mana leak, but because they didn't play like anything before, it's super likely that they have it. You know, so like you kind of know that your whale is gonna be good here, but I just think it's kind of a you're not making the best use of your cards here. So my problem with this is that you're like you have like 2 more lands in your hand and 2 1-for-1 removal spells against like Lingering Soul. So that's like kind of a losing battle. I know that Handmaster of Fells is like pretty good at like grinding against these tokens, but like Jon Finkel has an access to Purge, and this one Brand is like he already saw a bunch of cards. He played a Ponder, he played a Probe. And even if he doesn't have it, he can like still play spells at instant speed, maybe like a Snapcaster or something. And he can actually grind through the Handmaster, right? He has like Lingering Souls. He can tap it with a Dungeon Geist or something down the line. Like obviously this Handmaster is really good here, but I don't think it's necessarily good enough if you know on its own. I kind of think that you really want to resolve like one of your big spells. And even though like the Zenith is like super expensive, it's really hard to go like Zenith plus Whale. But it's not really that you're like dying anytime soon. You have 2 removal spells. And you can just like kind of wait on the Whale and you know resolve the Titan with it. I think that might have been better. I'm not sure. But another, like maybe a stronger argument is that if you play the Whale here, you're tapped out, so you can't Galvanic Blast, and if Jon Finkel has either Druxel Captain plus Image or 2 Druxel Captains, like he would need another white for that, but he can easily have that. You're basically just dead, right? If that happens, you're taking 6, and next turn you're like super likely to die. You can still top deck like a Slackstorm, but I just you know, why would you take that risk? That just seems super risky. Like even if you want to do this Handmaster plus Veil play, which I don't necessarily agree with, but even if you want to do it, like I think it's still better to maybe wait a turn so that you don't die to those captains. That just seems super risky to me. I don't know. It's not like this like Handmaster turn earlier is doing like that much. You know, I don't know. It just seemed kind of weird to me. Like on the first glance, it seems like an obvious play, right? Like you have 5 mana, they have mana for mana leak, you can go Handmaster to Well, that seems great, but there are actually like multiple reasons why maybe you don't want to do that. So Jon actually does have the Purge in his hand, which is pretty important. So now we're hitting the critical turn, or like amount of lands, when Brian Kibler can actually start casting Titans if he has them. Like 6 mana is, you know, the scary amount. So you might be considering to keep up like mana leak, but that like you're not really progressing that much if you do that. And also, if you like just like pass here, it's like super obvious that you have the Snapcaster. So you know Brian would most likely not play the Titan into the mana, and like if he draws like a Tron or something, you just basically wasted your turn. Jon decides to play a Ponder here. I don't like this turn was pretty hard. For, like I'm not sure if I would have done that, but maybe it's the best he can. He probably thought that you know he will not be able to hold up Snapcaster plus mana leak for multiple turns ahead, and it's not like Brian will ever play his big spell into his Snapcaster. So he's basically deciding between playing a captain that he knows that it's gonna, die to Galvanic Blast or Snapcaster plus Wonder. Snapcaster plus Wonder allows him to, draw into lands, so he can start casting multiple spells a turn. As you see, he actually drew into Evolving Wells, which is huge with his Lingering Souls, and it's kind of a nice blocker against those Handmasters. So I actually think his play was pretty good there. It was probably the right play. Definitely turned out pretty well because Brian doesn't have the 6 mana Titan and he drew into a Black Source, so that went really good for him. So now, as you can see, Brian is kind of like starting to flood out. He even drew Rampant Growth, so had he not do well, I think what he should have done was to just play Handmaster and let it get countered. He would still have red mana so that he wouldn't have to worry about Drugstore Captain plus Image. He would get rid of the mana leak. And, it's not that Jon Finkel's deck doesn't actually have that many counters. And it's not very likely that he will keep up 2 even if he has them, because Brian Kibler's deck has only 1 whale. So you can kind of assume that if you're able to play a big spell plus whale, it's going to resolve. So this turn he would just play Rampant Growth, keep up these removal spells, and then next turn he would be able to go Zenith into Whale and basically win, I think. Instead, he uses the Zenith to get a Handmaster. And once again, if it was a game 1, or if it was a regular Delver deck, or if Jon had a draw without Lingering Souls, these Handmasters would be insane. But I think Jon can actually, grind through these Handmasters pretty well. It's obviously very good. It's super annoying. And it's gonna maybe take Jon more resources, more than 1 card compared to Brian's, it costs him only 1. But he's flooding out, so that doesn't really matter. Jon hand is just gas, whereas Brian is kind of flooding out, and his deck is a lot of mana. So even if, it takes Jon 1.5 card or something, or 2 cards to trade these Handmasters, he can fight through it, and Brian can very easily flood out from this point. So yeah, Jon obviously trades. Well, he doesn't want to take 2, and it allows him to get a token with Moorland Hound. A reason to not block there is that you would think that that 2/2 always trades for the 2/1. But if you have the 2/1 in play, it actually stops both Handmasters from attacking potentially. But because Jon has a Celestial Perch in his hand and he has a Moorland Hound, he probably wants to trade, so I think that's fine. So yeah, Jon purges it, has his Handmaster end of turn, and as you can see here, this board with Jon untapping, it doesn't seem super bad for him, right? This Handmaster isn't super scary or anything. It's good, but when you're looking at this board, you're not oh, Jon is screwed. So I just think that he didn't really use his combination of Zenith plus Whale to its maximum. He could have had a Titan in play. So Jon sees 2 probes and Hound, obviously not good enough. The second Hound doesn't do anything, and the probes basically just cycle into the Hound and you're taking damage. So it just doesn't make sense to keep it, obviously. So Jon draws into another Snapcaster, which is actually pretty important because, first of all, if he has enough pressure in play, he can actually start passing with the Snapcaster mage up in case Brian top decks a Titan, and if he doesn't play anything, he can play Hound. Secondly, if Brian decides to pass with the Handmaster in play, he can actually upkeep with the Trigger on mistake and play Snapcaster and purge it or something. So that was a really good draw. I actually don't remember what Jon does this turn. Maybe just go because he has the Moreland Hunt, and he can just end up turn Snapcaster with Perch. Yeah. So yeah, by doing this. Wait, she didn't. Oh yeah, he played Wonder. Never mind. So yeah, he takes like damage from the Handmasters, but he's not like super worried about that. If Brian talkbacks anything, he can Snapcaster Mana Leak. If he doesn't, you know, he can just like Snapcaster plus Purge. He can also use Moreland Hunt, so. Yeah, he attacks with both. You might think that attacking with a Handmaster is like maybe dangerous, but you know, the Snapcaster, if he has Snapcaster, he can like just purge the Handmaster, right? So, you know, you can just attack with it. So yeah, now Jon kills it end of turn. He obviously didn't want to do it during the combat because he wanted to keep up Mana Leak. And now it's starting to look pretty good for Jon, right? Like, he was kind of fortunate to have like one of the purges against like Brian, who decided to go for like 2 Handmasters and just like kind of hope that they would work. But you can see that like he basically resolved like 2 of his pretty good cards. Right? Like one of his units just like normally resolved, and he helped the other Handmaster with Whale to resolve. So he basically forced through two of his like kind of bigger spells into play, but they just weren't good enough against like what Jon is doing here. His draw is like he doesn't have like that many lands. He has Lingering Soul, Snapcaster, Moreland House, so he's like grinding pretty well. And it's just like not enough. Like it costs Jon like some amount of resources, but not like that much. But just Brian's deck is so much mana that now he's just like kind of falling behind. He could instead he could have just potentially have a Titan. So Jon is just like looking for a counter spell here, because if he hits that, you know, he can just like make sure that one of the big spells that can like swing the game, they're worth like 3 or 4 cards, you know, Primeval Titan. If he's able to stop that, he will win this game. It doesn't matter that Brian has like removal spells, or he can even draw like sweepers and stuff like that, because he can just easily fight through it with Lingering Souls and Moreland Hound. So he drew into Snapcaster with a negate on the top to just like play around the potential Titan from the top, and if nothing happens, he can make a 1/1. This might seem kind of weak because you're only making a 1/1, but I think that you're like enough far ahead at this point that you can just like afford to play around it, at least for like this turn, and just make 1/1. Now that Brian has like infinite mana, maybe next turn you can like start playing something, but for this turn it was definitely right. Also, like, you know, even though you saw Brian's hand and he played a lot of cards that he drew, he could have easily drawn into like a Slackstorm or Whip Flare. So when you have a pretty good board and you can make tokens with Moreland Hound, you don't really want to add like that much to the board. This isn't Brian Snapcaster killing the Snapcaster. He's just showing the combats to Jon because he saw it with a good Axiom Probe on turn 1. Yeah, we're getting to the stages where I think it's actually looking pretty darn bad for Brian. Jon is attacking for a bunch of damage. None of these removal spells don't really like do anything against all these 1/1s. And you know, he's gonna die in like 3 turns. And Jon already assembled Snapcaster, Negate, and his hand is just like full of gas. I think it's like 1 more Lingering Souls, Captain, and a Dungeon, guys. I guess Brian can still top deck a Titan here, and Jon actually doesn't have a way to counter it, which would be pretty good, because even though he can top it with a Dungeon Geist, you know, he can't actually counter the combats, it's uncounterable. So, you know, Brian still has like super life draws. It's not like the game is over, but, you know, it's looking pretty bad for him right now. Interestingly enough, Jon this turn he decided to Flashback Lingering Souls instead of playing Captain. I think the reason is that it's not because he wants to keep up Snapcaster Mana Leak. Brian already has like more than enough mana to pay for that. It's more that he knows about 1-for-1 removal spells, so he just wanna put Lingering Souls into play instead. I'm not sure I agree with that. Obviously, you know, it would make those removal spells better, but your hand is kind of stacked, and I think you just want to make the more powerful play. It's not like Brian is dying immediately, and you know, down the line, playing the more powerful card can actually matter because it kind of forces Brian to play the removal spells. So maybe, you know, I don't know Jon's hand right now 100%, but let's say he plays like a Captain, it gets killed, then he plays a Captain, it gets killed. Like, yeah, you lost like 2 damage because, you know, those spirits would have like dealt damage, whereas the Captain just died. But then if Brian top decks like an Inferno Titan or Primeval Titan, you know, your dungeon guys can actually survive because, you know, he just like ran out of removal spells. I'm not like 100% sure, but I'm not saying this was a mistake. I'm just saying that like in general, you see people when they play against removal spells, they often make these kind of plays that would make sense in most of the games. Like you just want to play the Grandier card, or you just want to make the removal spell verse or the counter verse or whatever. But that's not really the case in the games where you just have like infinite cards in your hand. The reason why you don't want to play your creatures into removal spell is that, you know, you just want to get the maximum value of your cards, and just like playing Captain into Galvanic Blasts that you know about seems pretty bad. But when you know that you're not gonna be able to play all of your cards in the game, you just don't have enough mana to cast anything, or you have to keep up mana or whatever, then it might be different. Like just making the most powerful play is often the right play when, you know, you're just like kind of down on tempo and you don't have time to play everything. So yeah. Not saying it was a mistake, it was just like a kind of general thought. So Brian actually top decked the third Galvanic Blast here, which is the point where this game gets super interesting, because he's attacking with his Wolf. And I agree with Jon not like trading with it at this point, because it's super unlikely that Brian has like 3 Galvanic Blasts and he has a negate. It's kind of likely that he has 2 because he like knows about the one, he saw a bunch of cards, so it's not like super unlikely that he has 2, but you know, he knows about the Combust, and the 2 other cards that he wouldn't have, that he doesn't know about would have to be exactly 2 Galvanic Blasts. That's like extremely unlikely. So, you know, I don't blame him for not trading for this Wolf at this point. Also, he's at like at 10 right now, so he can still just like, you know, take those damage and maybe jump it next turn, but we're gonna see how it's gonna play out. I actually think that like Brian not taking this damage super fast is like slightly of an indicator that that is what he's holding, or at least it can potentially mean that he's holding at least 2, right? He just like doesn't want to lose an artifact. If you don't know how Galvanic Blast works, it's for 1 red, it deals 2, but if you have a Metalcraft, means that you have 3 artifacts in play, it deals 4. And like, I think that if Brian wasn't thinking about potentially winning with that, he would at least consider blocking, or he would think about it for a longer time. I actually think he would probably block the Snapcaster. It means that he has like 1 extra turn, potentially, but he just immediately took it, which kind of screams like danger to me. I would at least think that he might have 2. I think there is one more token that we can't see on the screen. So now Brian is at 4, facing down 6 spirits and a Snapcaster, so he's just like dying next turn. So Brian, this attack is the key moment of the entire game, right? So let's think about it. If Jon blocks, he knows about a Galvanic Blast, Combust, and there are 2 Nexuses. So if he blocks, he can block a Snapcaster, he can block a Spirit. There's one more Spirit that we can see, so let's see. Let's say he blocks that one with 1 Nexus, then he blocks this one. This dies because it blocks the Wolf. This is... okay, so he's not killing him next turn. I think that you block, right? I'm not like this is super hard because like we know how the game is going to end up. So obviously we know that if he just blocked, he would have won most likely. But it's obviously it's not that obvious because Jon might be thinking that Brian has only 2, and by not blocking, Brian has to like play the first one to target Jon, so he doesn't use removal spell to kill a creature, and then he plays the second one, he can negate it, so he saved like 1 more guy, and then he's gonna win. But like most likely he wasn't even like maybe thinking about free Galvanic Blasts there, and he's just like, yeah, take 2, whatever. I'm just gonna attack for the win. I have a negate in case something goes wrong. I'm not sure that like he made a mistake or whatever. The fact that Brian didn't think about a block might kind of give it away. He also like wasn't playing like Rampant Groans or even lands. So like, what is his hand, right? If his hand, it can be like a Whip Flare maybe, but if that's the case, then like blocking is also better. So I don't know. I think he should have blocked. I obviously wasn't sitting there, so I don't know. I also might be missing something. But yeah, it seems that Jon is like far ahead enough that he doesn't wanna necessarily risk that. It might be that he's potentially worried about something like an Inferno Titan or even maybe like a Primeval Titan plus like a land, block, kill a creature, and then he just lost 1 more guy that he can attack with. Maybe like the math doesn't add up if he blocks or something. I don't know. I actually don't think it's like that extremely unlikely that Brian has 3 Galvanic Blasts. As crazy as it can sound, like it's still pretty unlikely, but he wasn't really playing anything. He immediately took the damage. Like, what is his hand, right? Like, when you think about it only from the perspective how likely is he to draw those Galvanic Blasts, it's not very likely. But you also have to take into account that like his game actions, right? Like, which card he wouldn't have played. Like, what is his hand? What can it be? I think he would play the lands. He has a classic Wolfram in his deck, right? So you just play the lands. I don't think he would like send back 2 lands. I think if he had a Whip Flyer, he would have played it. I think any creature he would have played. So like, what is his hand? It can potentially be that he had only 2 Galvanic Blasts, and now he like top decked a Rampant Growth or land or a creature or whatever. That can definitely be the case, but at least 2 are like pretty likely, and it's not like extremely unlikely that he has 3, I think. And if you take that into account, that's like, if that's the case, I don't obviously know how likely it is that he has it, but we already established that it's not like super unlikely. It definitely, when you think about your chances of winning the game, like the potential combination of other cards he can have that you can lose to if you block, like you have like 1 less guy to attack with, like those chances are probably lower than him having 3 Galvanic Blasts, and also if he has like any other combination, and your block kind of screws you because you lose a guy attack with, the game still continues, and like you can still very easily win. Your hand is pretty powerful, whereas if he does have the blast, you just die. So I think you should have blocked, but it's obviously easy to judge after we see what happens. Brian just plays a sphere first, just to make sure that he has 3 artifacts, because there can be like a Vapor Snake involved into this Nexus. No reason to not do that. I wonder if Jon got scared when he saw the first one, because he still has the negate, remember? Now he negates and he thinks that it's over and Brian just kills him, so... I'm actually happy that it played out this way, because this is way more awesome. You know, if he had the free and he would have still lost, that would be kind of not as good as the story wouldn't be as good. So I'm kind of happy that it happened, but I thought it was interesting. It's definitely possible that I'm missing something, so I would like to hear an opinion about it. You know, I basically anytime I make a video, I miss something, like some reason to do something or not to do something. So yeah, if there is anything you would like me to cover, let me know, and see you next time. Bye bye.